We'll wait a second to see if he appears in his chair, and then we can start. Hi, Ken. Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I call to order the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting on Monday, April 5th at 6 o'clock. I know we've got a Board of Education meeting after this one, so I will make sure at 6:55, wherever we are, we'll just, at that point, we'll just stop and table whatever conversations, if there are any, until our next meeting. So. Okay, so we've got 6 policies on the agenda for tonight for initial discussion. You probably noticed as you were reading through them, they really revolve around 2 different legislative changes. So one is mostly having to do with some updates due to Title IX. And I'll get to that in a second. And then the other is about an executive order that Governor Lamont recently passed. So 4 of our policies tonight are in directly because of that. All right, so the first one we've got on the agenda is policy 0521. This is one of the ones that comes to us as a result of a recent executive order by Governor Lamont. So on March 4th, he signed into law Public Act 21-2, which is an act creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, and is referred to as the Crown, C-R-O-W-N Act. So this new law, which is effective immediately, expands on civil rights protections by defining race to include ethnic traits historically associated with race, including but not limited to hair texture and protective hairstyles. So again, 4 of the policies we'll see tonight, the updates are directly because of that. This is the first of those, and Shipman and Goodwin is the one who provided us with the language to conform to that new Public Act. So I don't know.
I had a quick question on that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Should that be protective hairstyles or protected hairstyles?
Protective. Oh, good question.
Because protective seems like armor and shields and helmets.
That is a good, good question. I don't have Shipman's actual language in front of me. I can look on the site afterwards, and whichever it is, if we decide to bring this to the full board, I can make sure it's the right one, but that's a great question. It looks like it's probably protective because it's in there twice and it defines protective hairstyles. But that is,
I know, and it's in a subsequent policy also.
Yeah.
So it stood out to me more in the second policy.
Yeah, where the dress code. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will. We'll ask that question. I have a feeling it's protective, but that's a good question to ask. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
The term protective is a term that's used associated with wigs and head wraps. So that is the language that's accurate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, protective. I get it. Yep. I see what you're saying. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? I mean, it was we had adopted this policy in October 28th, 2019. So it's not that old. We'd already done most of the updates to it, except for, as I said, this new one. And the cross references that it has in terms of, such complaints will be handled in accordance with other appropriate policies, such as policy 4118.1. Some of those are coming to us tonight as well. So I did just make sure that we have all those policies and that they're updated as well. Any other questions? I did notice one thing on this that wasn't in the others, and I don't know if it's a question to follow up with the attorneys on, but in the first paragraph where it refers to, it's like kind of midway, just halfway down, it's at the end of whatever that is, the third sentence. It starts, the board's prohibition of discrimination or harassment in its educational programs or activities expressly extends to academic, non-academic, and extracurricular activities, including athletics. And then this is the part that isn't in the other policies. It says, as well as the district website. which I wasn't quite sure why that language was there and not in the others, or why it's there at all, but I thought I would bring it up. I don't know that we necessarily need to ask them about it, but. I don't know when we would have discrimination on the website.
Yeah, I'm trying to process that a little bit. That's a good question, Margaret.
Yeah. And again, it only stood out to me because I was just comparing it with the other policy, but which didn't include that. I guess maybe because it's community. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the reason, right, because it identifies the educational programs.
Mhm.
And then, because obviously we would prohibit discrimination or harassment in the educational program, which is across a child's school day, and then obviously into extracurriculars or athletics. So the way that I'm taking this is the piece that's missing is ensuring that the content on our website would also not represent discrimination or harassment, because that's the one element that's missing out, that's part of our program, right?
Okay.
Or after, during. That's the way I'm receiving that, Margaret.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And again, because this is in the community section, the website is an important vehicle for the community. So that makes sense. Okay. Any other questions, or do we feel like this one is okay to bring to the board at whenever our the next meeting is at the end of April? Okay. Great. Ken, you're okay? Okay. I guess that when is our, what is that, April 26th or something, right? Is that what our?
The other piece that I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
Margaret, is ensuring that the district website is ADA accessible as well.
Yeah.
The other element
Okay.
that changed a couple years ago.
Yep. That makes sense. And I know that that's covered under the ADA policy as well. Okay. One last thing, I guess, just for Dr. De Silva, if I think there were some new regulations that might have gone along with this as well. If you can, again, regulations I know don't come before the policy committee, but if you could just make sure that if there's any updates to that, from Shipman based off of this latest change, that we get those put in there as well. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. Karen got kicked off, so we're trying to get her back in. But
Okay.
Yes, we do have the regulations, and those have been updated. I can make sure that you get a copy for 4118.1, 4218.1, but those will be updated on the website as well.
Great. Okay. All right. So this one can move to the full board at the end of April, if there's a room on the agenda for that. Okay, the next policy is sex discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace. This is policy 4118.1/4218.1. And just so everybody on the policy committee understands it, and actually is she still trying to get back in?
Yeah, we're trying to get her back in. For some reason, she got kicked off. And
okay,
It
yeah,
should be coming in right now.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
I would want her for this one.
John, when you do that, you sound like the Wizard of Oz, just behind a curtain. All we
Ignore
hear.
the man behind the curtain.
And just for the policy committee, because this is something I didn't know until relatively recently, but so when it's 4118.1/4218.1, what that really means is like the 4118 is for certified personnel, the 4218 is for the non-certified. So it makes sure that we cover this both groups under the same policy rather than having to put it twice in the policy book.
Oh, you know what, Margaret? I apologize. The regs that I'm looking at are not for
0521.
not for 0521. I'll have to look for the 0521. I'm looking at the ones for
Oh, this,
418. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I think Cheryl shared with me the regs for the 0521, so she must have a copy of that.
Okay.
Okay, great. Do we want to, I feel like should we wait for Karen on this one because it's a
Yeah,
personnel?
she's still stuck in joining. They're trying to work that through. So maybe we can hop.
Do we want to go? So maybe the next two were personnel. Do you guys want to go to the student dress code, which, I mean, it kind of ties in with the other one, the same rationale for the updates, but it goes deeper. Okay. All right. So we're going to policy 5132, which is the student dress code. So on this one, again, this came to us because of the Crown Act, but in reading it, and you guys probably noticed as well, our current policy is actually pretty broad, right? And then it uses the regulations to give the granularity that, you know, of what's acceptable and not acceptable. And it's interesting, Shipman's version of this policy actually almost includes all of the regs in the policy itself. So I think the first question I have for the board is, it would be perfectly acceptable for us, to be quite honest, to keep our policy broad if we wanted to do that and not get into the specifics of the dress code stuff, as long as we knew that the administration was going to update the regulations to make sure that they comply with the new aspects of the Crown Act. Because if you look at our current, are you able to see our current regulations? Did you guys get a copy of that, or did you see them on the website?
I didn't see the regulations. I have the policy, but.
Right, I'm looking to
Where-
see.
What are the, no, I don't have the regulations to me.
You might not have the regulations. I'm looking to see if they're on our website. So you could. So if you, I don't know if you guys are able to just open up a new tab and go to the Board of Education
Sure.
page. And on the website, and then go to the policies section. I apologize. I probably should have had them just give you guys the regs in advance. But it's under, if you go to that policy section, and then if you click on policy 5132, the regulations are under the policy. Did you guys find them?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you actually look at the language, our regulations pretty much mimic the same language as the new Shipman and Goodwin policy language. So again, there must have been a decision by the board at some point to, instead of have all the specifics in the policy itself, to have them in the regulations.
I had a couple questions, actually.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the no coats or outerwear. And frankly, I believe my sons have worn coats in high school for 8 years going. So without the use of a usable, accessible locker, I don't know how that could be avoided. And I've never had an issue with that, you know, them being told that they couldn't have something like that. So I just wonder where that falls these days.
And
Practically
question.
speaking,
sorry,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Tina.
no, just to echo, just because it'll help you answer. It's the same thing when it says about sleeveless shirts. I've seen kids wear sleeveless shirts. I mean, you know, and you know, the wearing pants or shorts that reveal upper thigh. I mean, I see that too. I have friends of girls, I've given lift to kids who've worn them for sport practice or whatever. So just tying in with Nora's question, how does that work? Because I read this and then I went back to the reality because it is so different. So how does that work? So it ties up with exactly what Nora asked.
I think practically speaking, there's certainly flexibility within the policy and the regulation, so long as it's not disruptive to the learning process. What I think this policy and the regulations looks to avoid is having students come in with a coat that's over their, with the hoodie over their head, right? Where they're not engaged. So what I think that's what they're looking to avoid naturally, when if a child is cold or uncomfortable, and we've had that a lot over the course of this year, especially with the windows being open during COVID, you had children wear coats, they wear hoodies. Now, if they had the hoodie over their head, certainly coming down to the point of a practical experience, we would ask the child to remove the hoodie. And if they gave us a hard time, we would refer to the policy. So to be really transparent, I think you do have the policy to protect the teachers and the school from having clothing that could be disruptive to the educational program, while at the same time, practically speaking, so long as it's not, and if it adds a layer of comfort to a child, I don't think that there would be any cause for asking them to remove it.
I think that's why I was wondering, does the board itself want to keep the policy broad to allow for some of that discretion, because it makes sense for the administration through their regulations to be the ones to determine some of that. Because I had the same questions. I think those are excellent questions, Nora and Tina. Go ahead, Ken.
I'm sorry. And I noticed that it doesn't say anything in here about why. So, I mean, even keeping the blanket, any clothing, any dress that disrupts or distracts from the learning environment, or however.
Yeah, it's in the regs. I don't think it's in the policy, Ken, but it's like the first 8 pieces in the regs, not what you have in front of you. So it's what's online. So they have like a bulleted list of, why it's kind of, it's important for schools to reduce this distraction, to provide an environment where kids can focus more on learning, enhance school safety by making it harder to conceal a weapon. So that's like those other pieces are there, create a greater sense of community, preparing students for future roles in the professional workplace. You can't come in with a hoodie over your head if you're coming to a job. Creating an atmosphere that reflects seriousness and purpose, presenting a more positive image, and minimizing disruption. So like, for example, some of the safety too. So for younger children, we ask them to avoid flip-flops or open-toed shoes because they're on the playground, and, in terms of getting hurt could be problematic. So those are the reasons that they're there. Again, operationally, having, gone to schools for many years, it's, again, I think there's some discretion on the part of the teacher and or the school administrator on whether or not it's disruptive. That said, it could add to its own level of challenge on why is this teacher making me pull down my hoodie and the other teacher not making me pull down my hoodie? I do think that there's a level of professionalism that we all keep in mind. And at least in the times that I've worked in communities, it really very rarely has it been problematic. And when it has been problematic, it's more around the safety piece, and disruption sometimes with the printed material, right, across a shirt. And we've approached that individually with students, and parents do understand. But that's why it's there.
What could we, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but can we reference that? So for example, in the policy, in order to maintain an environment conducive to educational process, in line with regulation, et cetera, just to reference it here, so that if somebody's looking at here, they know the reasons are over here. And I think you just insert a little phrase there in that first sentence, I think could get us there. And my other comment on here, I know that's not what we were just talking about. I would feel better if the protective hairstyles was in its own bullet, because it's actually not a head covering. It's actually a hairstyle. So could we just have it as a separate item?
I think it's a hair covering too, right? Because some of the, I don't want to misspell, but some of them do wear head coverings, and it is part of the protected.
Sure, but the
I'm not
hairstyles
sure.
aren't.
But
So
you
to
want-
say that
I
an
make-
afro is a head covering, I just think adds
Makes sense.
confusion. I mean, but we could also, that phrase that we added, the nothing in this policy, could be its separate bullet
Yeah.
and not be out of place.
I makes sense. I have a question, and maybe it's a weird one, but I'm just trying to understand. In the Shipman and Goodman, and I think it's in our regulations, it says approved coverings worn as part of students' religious beliefs. When you say approved, that means, I know there are some religions in which children have to wear head coverings. Do they tell the
It's
district? How does
pre-approval.
this work? I've always been curious about how this works, because hijabs, Sikhism, they wear head coverings, right? It's part of their religious beliefs. So how does that work?
Well, yarmulkes too, for that
Yes,
matter.
thank you. Yes.
So again, going back to those bullets at the top of the regulation, so long as it wasn't disruptive, and if it was, and this for whatever the reason, then we might have to go through a process that individual needed approval for whatever. Let's just say it was something that was continuously falling in an elementary classroom and distracting the other students. That might need to go through some type of, let's be sure why we're using it. If someone was being silly with it, I could think of all the things that happen in schools with kids. So that's the only time that I imagine we would need a process for approval. Tina, I know policies and regulations are there for a reason, but there's also a level of professionalism, sensitivity, et cetera, that we expect our professional staff to navigate. Can I just go back to something, Ken, Tina, did I answer that? Okay. I just want to go back to the protective hairstyles. I don't know that it makes a difference to whether or not we could bullet it in this particular policy. I'm just going back to the first policy where it was inclusive around protective hairstyles. So it was all one. Hang on a minute. So, it was all right. So it was connected to race.
Connected to race, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
so it was it was all one chunk. Let me just make sure I'm articulating that correctly. I don't know that it makes a difference really, other than just the way that I just kind of interpreted it. And I guess it's distinguished here.
I'm actually thinking along the same lines you are. I mean, it's distinguished here. I think it could be distinguished. And even from my perspective, it's a matter of respect, where somebody wearing cornrows is much different than somebody wearing a baseball cap.
Right.
And so it's from that's how I interpreted
Yes.
it.
Yeah, I agree. And then if anything, Margaret, if you're going to make that change, then I would say it should probably be D, because C goes with A and B.
Mhm.
Agreed. Yeah, that makes sense.
Although I think so, if we are saying that what we want to do is keep the policy broad, this would be a change in the regulations, which wouldn't come before the full board. So that would be good. I think, right? I think that's what I heard the group say, is we'll keep the policy itself broad, but what we're making is recommendations to the administration for how to change the regulations.
Understood.
Right. And perhaps referencing the regulation in the policy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so what I have here is adding, so if we kept like the first sentence as it is, second sentence starts out, but adding at the end of the second sentence in the first paragraph, appropriately attired for school and clean in order to maintain an environment conducive to the educational process, and then as outlined in corresponding regulations.
I think that makes sense.
Yep.
So I wonder when we do bring, so I'm assuming, is this okay for us to bring to the full board end of the month as well? And I feel like when we do that, perhaps we should bring, actually on both of these, the corresponding regulations so that people understand, since so much of it lives through that. Okay. So I know we've got Karen back with us, but we only have one more that has to, oh, actually, no, those were the, wait, so the Crown Act, I'm sorry, the Crown Act, we had a couple more policies to go. I didn't know if we wanted to kind of stay in that mode of thinking with, and we'll go out of order a little bit so that we stay with all the Crown Act ones. Okay. So the next one would be 5145.4, which is non-discrimination students. Again, same change here. This policy was, again, like the others, updated October 28th of 2019. So it's up to date, except for, again, this one piece having to do with the Crown Act. Any questions? Okay. So do we want to move this one on to the full board as well? Okay. Great. Okay. Then the last one kind of in this group of policies actually is relates is non-discriminate is, sorry, 5145.5. Sorry. 5145.5. Sorry. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. 5145.4. Sorry. No, we just did that one.
No, that was- yeah,
Throwing
it's
myself
5,
off.
you're right.
I'm sorry, it's 4118.11. I went out of order there. You guys see that, the non-discrimination personnel, 4118.11?
Oh, yep.
Okay, so again, this one, we recently updated October 28th, 2019. There must have been a legislative change then. So the updated language is the same as the others. I did have one other noticing on this, but I don't know if anyone has other questions. So this one, it's interesting. The second paragraph, if you look at the last line, as it includes, so this one didn't reference the website, which was the one when I was comparing this paragraph, right? But that's okay. I think we understand why. But where it says in this last sentence, it is also the policy of the Board of Education to provide for the prompt and equitable resolution of complaints alleging any discrimination on the basis of protected characteristics. Bing, 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 bing. This one includes, after pregnancy, it includes genetic information and then a paragraph about genetic information. And that's not in the other policies having to do with this act. I just wasn't sure what that, why that's in this particular policy. It's not something that's part of this update, but I was just curious. It was probably what part of the update in 2019. I was just curious if anyone understood that.
I'm sorry, where are you, Margaret?
I'm sorry. So if you look at it, like the third paragraph here, it talks about genetic information. And if you go up to the second paragraph, just the line before it is where it refers to genetic information. That was not in the other policies, you know, that were updated for the Crown
Which
Act.
policy are we looking at? I'm sorry, that's where
I'm sorry, 4118.11.
11. Oh, sorry. I was on 4118.1. I apologize.
Yeah, it's so confusing.
I apologize. That was my, so I was missing all that. Okay.
So I'm trying to identify why it might be different.
I mean, this has to do with personnel, so maybe there's something.
Yeah.
With hiring.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Karen.
honestly, I don't recall any reason why that one was more expansive in the definition. So I really can't help. I don't know.
Okay. Again, it wasn't part of what the updates were for this round. It just struck me as interesting. And I didn't know if maybe in the hiring, there's access to genetic information for personnel that it's not a question of community or students because you wouldn't have that. So maybe they didn't feel like they needed to protect.
No.
No? Interesting.
It's in 0521, right?
It says genetic information. It says
No, gender.
gender, only gender. Yeah.
Yeah. So Margaret, if I can just go back, I don't know the answer to that one. I'm with Karen.
Okay.
We would have to ask. But I guess on this one, I don't understand though, why it doesn't say district website.
Oh.
I understand why they did on the other one. I don't understand why we did not here.
Okay.
So would there be any reason why we wouldn't want to add that? I mean, it's word for word the same. I don't understand why they wouldn't.
Yeah, right. I can't think of any instance where adding it in here would prohibit us from something that we'd want to do that we couldn't then, right? I mean,
I feel like it's more problematic on the contrary. versus-
exactly. Yep, I agree with you. Okay.
Okay, now.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this one? Right. We can make that that adjustment. We'll bring that to the full board end of the month as well.
I had a more general question, and this is, you know, perhaps learning for myself,
Yeah.
is why, if discrimination, why is sex discrimination and sexual harassment pulled out when any kind of discrimination and any kind of harassment is prohibited? Why is it this is double prohibited? Because you can't discriminate on gender, you can't discriminate on race, you can't discriminate on, so, and obviously you can't discriminate on sex. So, you know, why do we, you know, I mean, if we need separate for sex, why don't we have separate for gender, or separate for race, or separate for every other you know, shouldn't discriminate at all, period, for any reason.
Right.
But why is sex pulled out? I mean, it's just as bad to harass somebody because of their race or their ethnicity or their head wear or their protective hairstyle.
Yeah, my gut tells me it has to do with legislation, but we'll ask that question because I think it's a good, you're exactly right. Like the intent is obviously you can't discriminate on anything. So yeah, we'll just ask that question for clarity. It's a good one.
And this is just an odd one also. We, in the non-discrimination, so 4118.11, where we talk about veterans, we explicitly named the Connecticut National Guard, but I would think any National Guard. You know, if it's the New Jersey National Guard, that's okay because it's Jersey.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's in the 05212. I mean, we could probably
just take out the state.
Right, yeah, just take out the state.
Including the National Guard.
Yep, I'll do that in both of those. Good point.
Margaret, I hate to ping pong back on the genetic information. So I'm just trying to figure out the distinguishing difference there.
Yeah.
So they include every characteristic with the exception of that one on 0521.
Yeah.
And add it into 4218, which is personnel.
Yeah.
Is it because access to that information, in some way we may have access to that information through personnel that we wouldn't have? I mean, not that we would actually, but
yeah,
I think that was Margaret's original question. And, you know, there's nothing that we ask of anybody that would disclose that information.
Because even if someone has a medical procedure or any of that, that's completely protected. We don't, as a district, we don't know that.
unless they elect to share.
Unless they elect to share, right? So it's not like we get.
Maybe that's the piece, is that they may have elected to share. I don't.
And then they can't be discriminated against because they
chose to tell.
Right.
Like maybe it's a part of employment law as opposed
Right.
to.
Yeah.
We can, we'll ask, we're going to ask Shipman anyway about that other question. So we should ask them, why genetic.
Right.
And it could be a carryover because I think several years ago there was the scare of, with all of the 23andMe and
Yeah.
all of that, all of those ancestry.coms and all of that, the genetic tracing. I think maybe there was a scare about that, so maybe that was in response to that. Maybe.
That's fair. All right.
I thought about that too. It was written a little bit different than that. They always have a good reason why they have these things in there that we can't figure out in isolation, but we can ask.
We'll ask, sure. All right. So we'll ask about those two questions. We'll remove Connecticut from National Guard.
What was the first question, Margaret? I just want to make sure.
The one, why is sexual harassment and discrimination pulled
Yeah.
out specifically when discrimination of any kind isn't really?
Yep, I had it on the other.
Yeah. And then the two changes are adding the website on the district website on here after athletics and removing Connecticut National Guard.
Yep.
And assuming, we've got good answers to those questions, we'll bring this one to the board as well. So right now we've got 4 policies to go. All righty, so the next two out of
Sorry.
Yeah.
So on that, so on the 4118.1,
yeah,
would that the paragraph about protective hairstyles, would that be better as the third paragraph? Because the second paragraph is where we mention race.
And 4118.1, oh, I see. Okay.
Not discriminate, because we talk about race and then we could say race includes this, and then we start talking about genetics, veteran, etc. It seems it's a little jarring to now talk about race again, and then, all right, wait a minute, what did we say about race? And then we had to go, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just a preference thing because each of those qualifies something from the paragraph before, but we certainly could.
That's true. But race is mentioned first, so.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, as long as it's there, that's fine.
Yeah, this should be in order.
Yep.
I like order.
Yes. All right. Anything else on that one? All righty. So now to the other two. These have to do more with Title IX and Shipman and Goodwin's reason for updating these. It wasn't necessarily a legislative change, but instead what they've done is updated the policies and administrative regulations based on their own experience as attorneys implementing the new Title IX federal regulations. So I think there's probably been some instances that have come to them at the firm that have caused them to rewrite these policies to be more practical in nature. They said the changes include adding definitions and procedures related to sexual harassment under state law and Title VII, and clarifying practical issues of implementation concerning, for example, witness notification and use of administrative leave. So as I said, these are based more on it sounds like practical implementation of what had been the policy before. So let's look at 4118.1 first. So our last update to this was in August of 2020. So not that long ago, August 24th. And you can see from the red line, there's a lot of changes to it. Again, it just has to do more with clarification of the definitions as well as the reporting.
Yeah.
What I did notice is, again, on the regulations on this one. So again, this is another one, Susie, perhaps, where the regulations need to be updated even more than the policy. Those I think are from 2011, I saw. So those I feel like probably need to be, again, not in front of the board, but those do need to be updated.
Okay.
All right, any questions on the 4118.1 or comments? Go ahead, Nora.
I just had a question or comment. In the third paragraph or the second red paragraph,
Yep.
it talks about the conduct must have occurred within the United States of America. And I just am wondering how it works like in a trip abroad that's, that has personnel from the school and how they're protected there and how students are protected there and so on.
Yeah, it's the first sentence there, Nora. I think for conduct to violate, the conduct must have occurred in the education program or activity of the board. So I feel like that's
Oh, so it's not exclusive to it. The United States doesn't override that?
that's not my interpretation of that.
Okay.
I
Okay.
actually interpret it like Nora did. It reads as a list.
Yeah, because I think the and, is that why, Ken, on the third,
Yep.
after the second semicolon?
Yep.
The and is what's making you think
Yep.
that it's all
It has to
inclusive,
be
right?
this, and this to qualify. You want to throw an or in there, Dr. De Silva? We're good.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Well, if that's the case, you have to refer to the United States of America. It's just our educational program, regardless
Exactly.
of where.
You could take it out. You're right. Exactly. You could
Okay.
strike the whole US. Yep.
I wonder if there's something, we'll ask Shipman about that, because I wonder if it's specifically talking about Title IX violation, and maybe the Title IX
Yeah,
law has something
Maybe
about
Title
it
IX.
to
Oh,
refer
that's a
to
good point.
US soil. I don't know. I mean, obviously we wouldn't want something, if our students were abroad, we would
Right,
want.
so if our students were abroad with our staff and there was a Title IX violation relative to the conduct of our staff while they're chaperoning a
Right.
exchange or a Chinese visit, right, or China visit, we wouldn't want to, nor would we, but
Well, I think technically maybe that would be a violation, just not a violation of Title IX.
Title IX, exactly.
right.
Right.
I just don't want there to be a loophole.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Yeah. For sure.
Good, excellent question.
And it's on the next one too, 5145.5.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, we can ask about both of those.
Margaret,
Yeah.
don't hate me. I guess, well, everybody don't hate me. But we're flipping back in order. So in my packet that I have, we're back to the 4118.11.
We're at 4118.1.
No, I know. But in my
You wanna go
packet,
to four-
the
oh,
next
sorry.
one. So I'm dragging everyone back real quick.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
We're talking about harassment on the basis of color. Is that even that offends me, and I'm clearly not a person of color. Is
Where
that on the basis of race, color, religion? Is that still a term that you can discriminate against? Are people colors? I know we use the term people of color.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll ask. I mean, that's in their language. I don't know, again, if, sometimes statutes don't catch up to things as quickly as they should.
Well,
so-
I'm also not a person of color, so I don't know if is that the reference. To me, color comes from my growing up is offensive.
Yeah. Oh, no, I totally agree. I don't know if the
Each
language.
race had its own color, and that's how you could marginalize people.
Yep.
But we do use the term person of color now, so it's not. So am I again reading too much into it, or did growing up in the South permanently damage me? That's also possible.
We'll ask that question when we ask Shipman the other questions, because again, it might be part of like the legislation, so it has to be in there, and again, might not have caught up.
Yeah, I also am wondering what would be in lieu of what, right? I don't know that you would have another, I mean, we say race, we say ethnicity, or race, color, religion, age. I don't know what we would say in lieu of.
Well, what does color refer to?
Well, it could refer to anything, right? It could be I'm a person of color because
Right.
I'm Indian, right? And so
Sure.
therefore I'm being discriminated against,
But
really.
you're being discriminated against because of your race or your ethnicity, not because of the color of your skin. Well, I don't know, because I'm not. So it was just interesting to me that there were just when I was growing up, that it was used to marginalized people. So just.
Yeah, and I think there's a part of this with it, which is looking to avoid just that.
Yeah.
Right? Is that exactly what you just described, Ken? Is that
Okay.
in order to avoid marginalizing people of color, however way you might do that.
Okay.
That's my interpretation, but certainly if we want to ask, we can.
Yeah, no, and I'm okay. Again, it's not, yeah. That's definitely an outside.
I think in many ways it's attempting to do exactly what you're describing,
I think so.
right?
Yeah,
Is to avoid exactly what your experience was.
Okay.
Anything else on that one, or?
I had one more question on the second page.
And
Which one?
Oh, sorry, going back to point 1.
Yep.
So, and this just might be my own reading and just for clarification, but sort of midway down with the black font, it says retaliation against in that section. I'm just wondering if the sentence that begins with violations of this policy will not be permitted and may result in discipline up to and including discharge from employment. Does that discipline and discharge refer to the person who did the retaliating?
You're on 4118.
8.1.
The point 1?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the
the
one we
third
were-
page. The black paragraph.
Third page. Okay, sorry. Got
Sorry,
it.
sir.
Oh, sorry, sorry, could you ask your question again? Sorry, Nora.
Yeah. Great. So in the section with the dark font, and it says retaliation against any employee, right? The second sentence says violations of this policy will not be permitted and may result in discipline up to and including discharge from employment. And it just wasn't clear. Is that discipline and possible discharge of the person who retaliates?
It's of the person, right? So an example would be that an administrator condemned somebody for complaining that they were sexually harassed. That administrator would then may result in a consequence of discipline or discharge for mistreating the individual who made the complaint.
Okay, and if that's clear to everyone else.
It's not, no, nor I think you could view it that way. I think to make it clearer, either the retaliation piece should be at the end, because here the violators are prosecuted, violators are this, violator are that, and anybody that reports it is safe from retaliation. To make it even more clear, perhaps we remove it and we put it underneath any employee with notice of sex or misconduct allegations shall immediately report such information. And then we could put any reporters are protected from retaliation. So put the reporting pieces together and the violation pieces together.
So if I'm hearing you,
that up, I think.
and if I'm hearing you, you're taking from the word retaliation to the word law and putting it below the next paragraph in red.
I think that adds the most clarity, or at the very least put it at the end of penalties. But I think it makes sense, since we're adding that paragraph about who's required to report. I think we can say that the reporters are protected. And I think that makes sense there, what you just said, Dr. DeSalvo.
Any other questions on this policy?
Can I go back to that? I'm sorry, Ken. So why wouldn't, it looks like it's separate, but in fact, it's really not. Oh, hello.
Oh,
Good night.
Good night.
Now we have to go.
Too early for bed. You can tell your dad I said so. Can I just ask a question? Why would it not? So it looks like it's separate, but it's really not, right? So starting in the black font, why would we not move that up instead of what I just suggested, not move it right up to the board directs its employees to respond to such complaints in a prompt and equitable manner. And then
Right.
maybe the word or comma, any retaliation against an employee for complaining about sex discrimination or sexual harassment. Because I think those are intended to be obviously once you take the red line out, they're intended to be one
Right.
paragraph, right?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
But then that last paragraph then is a little awkward. Can that last paragraph be inserted up there also? Because again, it's talking about reporting.
I think when it's all cleaned up, it ends up there. I think the red, right?
That last red also?
Oh, I don't, Margaret, is that all one?
I think the last read was a separate paragraph. So what I'm hearing you say is the retaliation line, right, kind of fits at the end of the first paragraph.
Yeah,
Um,
better than it does in my opinion, than what I originally suggested.
Sure. But then what's the difference between employees in that first paragraph and any board employee with notice in the second one? Is it like the first one is witnessed and then the second one is notified? But so should they be together, or is it?
So it's interesting because that last paragraph,
Uh-huh.
the way that I read that is, I'm a teacher, you're a teacher. Can you come and tell me that someone's been sexually harassing you? Then as a board employee, since you've just told me that, I need to go report right away to my building principal or my Title IX coordinator. So
Right,
that's, to me, that's different though than you know, really, it almost feels like that should come first. Of all the paragraphs, that paragraph should
Right,
come
sure.
first, and then the rest of it below. Because then we're talking about once you've reported it to me as your administrator, then.
Yep. I think they're the same thing. If you're encouraged to report a complaint is the same as notice. To me.
right, but I feel like that first paragraph is encouraging the victim to come forward.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about the second sentence.
Oh, the second. Oh, yeah. Well, it's like that second sentence actually covers both scenarios, right? Doesn't it cover the victim and it covers somebody who has notice, right? So is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then in that last red paragraph, we talk about an employee with notice is required.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the same, literally the same, except it talks about Title IX there. Is it possible to have an incident of sex discrimination or sexual harassment that does not violate Title IX?
If it's outside the United States. I'm kidding.
Apparently.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think.
Well, I think the difference is they're speaking about allegations, right? Is that here it?
Okay.
So,
Well, a complaint would still be an allegation, I think, till proven.
yeah.
So just maybe that just these three paragraphs, or I guess it's two, that the space at the end of that first red section throws me off. But maybe that just needs to be tightened up, just those three pieces, and then it's a good paragraph. I mean, all the pieces are there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think they're using the word or they're using the context of employee a little bit, I think just too general, because when it's saying the board directs its employees to respond to such complaints in a prompt and equitable manner, the way that I'm receiving that employee at this point is your Title IX coordinator, your building administrator, your Karen Doing, your superintendent.
Yep.
later when I'm reading board employee, I'm not reading it in the same way because I'm reading it as it could be any employee, the board employee, any board employee, right? Anyone, you know, a maintainer to a maintainer, a teacher to a maintainer, vice versa, paraprofessional, anyone who receives the allegation should then report it to the building principal or the Title IX coordinator. So I feel like they're loosely using the word board employee. One has authority, right? One doesn't. Not to say that if I retaliated, if you told me, Ken, we're teacher to teacher, and I retaliated against you because you complained about my friend harassing you, I could still retaliate towards you, but I'm not in a position of power, which like shifts things a little bit for me. So I feel like it's understood, but I do feel like the language is a little bit general here.
Well, and then just the employees without any qualification is even more general. The beginning of the second sentence there.
Yeah.
So why don't we, I'm just noticing the time. So obviously we've got some more questions on this policy. In the next one, we didn't really, so we'll table 4118.1 and 5145.5. We'll have that come back to committee in our May meeting. And what we'll do is we'll dig a little deeper, especially into that paragraph. I think there were some good questions there. Dig a little deeper as to what the intent is and then how to make it clearer, I guess. As well as a question about the United States. Were there any other questions, just very quickly? Did anybody have anything on 5145.5 that if we're to be talking to Shipman and Goodwin that you would want us to ask that might have a legal question? No.
Just the general, again, why are we pulling out sexual harassment?
Yeah.
Would be my question.
All right, everybody, thanks. So we'll forward the 4 policies having to do with the Crown Act to our meeting at the end of April, and these other 2 will come back to us in May.
Okay.
All right, see you in a few minutes.
Hey, John, just real quick, the whole meeting, I didn't freeze once. Thank you.
You're good. And your camera is actually really